So as we get to the end of the year and we have just a couple weeks left, as I'm recording this, it's December 15th, which is a little bit wild to me. I'm like, I can't believe that 2023 is almost over. Like that we literally just have a couple of weeks left of this year. It's really been a year that has been very, very focused, I think, for most people on growth. It was a 7-year universally in numerology, and 7 years are all about growth and expansion in our spirituality. So, and that isn't often comfortable. So I think that, people, when they step into a 7-year from a personal perspective or a universal 7-year, they kind of expect everything to just be enlightening and expansive. But, like any other form of growth, we do have to go through the deconstruction part and the change, the dark night of the soul moment, the tower card, to actually experience growth. Now, I don't know why we decided as human beings that we needed to have growth and evolution come on the heels of difficulty and challenge and obstacles, but that's what we decided. So it is what it is. And I guess we just pretty much have to deal with that. So a 7-year is often a year of coming home to our faith. It is often a year of coming back to those foundational beliefs in God, source, universe, all that is, and into, it's often just a return to things that we've actually stepped away from, whether that's our personal spiritual practices, whether that's God, whether that's, our connection to source, whether that is our connection to our higher self. And this certainly has happened for me this year. I think that about halfway through the year, I started recognizing and realizing that I had stopped really consciously cultivating that connection with my higher self and God. And so it definitely has been a return to that for me. And a realization how just as human beings, we go through these cycles, we go through these 9-year cycles, these 9-year numerological cycles. And, people that don't really believe in numerology, I'm like, well, just look at what happens in the collective as we move through year by year. Like it just plays out in such a really interesting way. I mean, even from the perspective of, this being a 7-year and us having some of the stuff that's happening from a geopolitical climate around religious beliefs with the Israel-Hamas war, like that is very representative of something that would happen in a 7-year, where people are really doubling down on their religious beliefs and their relationship to their God. And then, desiring to actually show up in a way where they're willing to fight and defend that with their life in some cases. So I really encourage you, as we sit in these last 2 weeks of this 7 universal year, to look at how has that showed up for you? How is that return to faith, or that return to, your connection with God, source, universe, all that is, or your higher self? Like, how has that showed up for you? And, what were the challenges around that this year? And, so what does that have to do with business? Well, I don't think that we can actually separate any parts of our lives from the other places. I think that's actually when we really start to run into trouble, when we try to really compartmentalize and we say, oh, well, business is here and personal life is here and my connection to God is here and my family is here. And I think we do that for a lot of reasons, one of which is that, we have these preconceived notions that we need to focus on balance. So we need to have really good work, home, life balance. And we've been programmed and conditioned to believe, that we should keep these things separate, that our relationship with God, for example, should be separate from our business, that our relationship with God, and I'm saying God, but obviously insert source, universe, whatever feels aligned, whatever feels divinely aligned for you. But, or that we should separate our relationship with God from our career, from our purpose work, from our, not often our purpose work, right? But from our career, from the work that we do day to day, from our relationships with our friends, from our relationships with our family. And I think that this year, what we've really been asked to do is to break down those barriers and to actually recognize and realize that when we let God into all areas of our life, when we cultivate that connection with our creator or with our higher self, if that feels more comfortable to you, and we allow that relationship to actually come into all the areas of our lives, then we end up more fulfilled in all the areas of our lives. So now we sit here at the end of December, and, I think the most important thing that we can do right now in these last 2 weeks is to be radically self-responsible and accountable for the excuses that we made this year, for the lies that we told ourselves this year, for the justifications that we made this year for not stepping into the highest expression of who we came here to be. And not from a place of beating ourselves up, right? Not from a place of being like, okay, I need to do this evaluation, and oh, look at what a horrible person I am. I didn't keep my commitments to myself in relation to my health. I didn't keep my commitments to myself in how I showed up in my purpose work. Like, that's not the point. The point is to do a deep reflection so that you have data and you're able to see really clearly where you stood in your own way, so that you can actually shine the light on that and make a commitment to do things differently in the new year. So, for me, it's very easy as human beings to be like, well, I didn't do this because X. I didn't follow through with this because I was waiting on this person to do that, or this person didn't show up the way I wanted them to show up. Or, the Facebook algorithm wasn't supporting my message getting out into the world, or, my client fired me, like whatever the reason was, right? Like, we have all these excuses and justifications for why. But I think if you step into this exercise over the last couple weeks of the month with just, what? I'm not going to put the blame anywhere outside myself. I'm just going to be radically accountable and responsible for where I didn't show up. I'm just going to be radically accountable and responsible for all the justifications that I made and all the excuses that I made and all the lies that I told myself. And I'm just going to allow myself to actually really fully see it and absorb the data. And is it disheartening? And can it be disheartening? Yeah, because the reality is that almost every single one of us is holding ourselves back in every single day in ways that we don't even recognize or realize. And that's why I think this exercise is so important. Because as long as we keep it in our unconscious reality and we don't actually attempt to bring it into our consciousness and attempt to acknowledge it and attempt to look at it for what it is, then we just keep walking through life unconsciously, and we just keep making excuses, and we just keep making justifications. And then as a result of that, we just keep not achieving the things that we desire to achieve. So I really love for you to take this opportunity to be really conscious about what hasn't been working for you and where you've been getting in your own way. And so make lists of these things, put it in writing so that you can actually see it, write it out by hand so that you're making that really, incredible brain to body and paper connection with your handwriting. Like, it will bring it more into your conscious mind. Acknowledge the places where you haven't lived up to the highest expression of who you came here to be. And then look at each item on that list, look at each justification, look at each excuse, and take accountability for it. Take accountability for it in a way that you fully release and surrender and forgive any other party that was involved in that scenario and situation, including yourself, right? But you look at the data. And then next to that on your list, write how you can do that differently from this moment forward. And especially in how in 2024, you can avoid making that same mistake again. And get really clear on the actions that you need to take if that old behavior starts creeping up again, or if that old pattern starts creeping up again, or if that old justification or excuse starts to show up in your life. What are you going to do to combat it? Because if you're not prepared, you will just fall back into old behavior patterns. You will fall back into old habitual ways of doing things. And so this exercise over the next couple of weeks, it's designed to give you some ammunition to combat yourself as you step into the new year. And it's vitally important that you do this because we have an incredible, incredible energy in 2024. It is an 8 universal year. This is a year of growth and abundance and prosperity. It requires work. It doesn't just, get sprinkled on us like glitter fairy dust from the heavens. Like, it does require that we show up and we do the work and we be willing to make the shifts that were identified in the 7-year. So all the places this year that you were brought back to your personal values, that you were brought back to your personal integrity, where you were shown how you'd fallen off the path towards your highest and best good. Like, you've got to take those lessons into the new year and you've got to really implement them. But as long as you do that, you've got this beautiful universal energy of abundance backing you. This only happens once every 9 years, so we need to take advantage of it. And especially the seeds that you sowed in the 4-year. So think back to that. I'm so horrible with math. I need to actually do the math. So the 4-year would have been 2020. Yeah, the 4-year was 2020, right? Okay, so in the 4-year, the seeds that you sowed in the 4-year come to fruition with hard work and discipline and dedication in the 8-year. The seeds that you sowed in the 4-year come to fruition. So think back to 2020. And 2020 was an incredibly hard year for many of us with the pandemic and everything that happened around that. But for me, 2020 was actually my best financial year I've ever had in my whole entire life. So do some evaluation of what you were doing right in 2020. What were the ideas and the thoughts that you had in 2020 around the impact that you desired to make in the world? This is one of the things that I've realized for myself, and I've had such an aha moment over the last month or so, was like, I had these very, very specific goals and dreams in 2020 that when 2021 and 2022 came and kicked my ass a little bit, the second half of 2021 and 2022, I actually fell away from those goals and ambitions that I had set in 2020. So do some reflection on 2020 and look at what were the seeds that you began to sow in 2020? What were the things that you desired to accomplish? Who did you believe the highest expression of who you came here to be was in that time? And obviously we grow and we change and we evolve, right? So it's not going to be exactly the same, but look there for the seeds. Because those seeds, those ideas, those thoughts, those inspirations around who you could be in the world, you can bring to fruition next year in 2024. And be prepared to work hard. So 4 years, 2020, 4 years are all about hard work, laying the foundations, busting your ass, like really getting in there, toiling the soil, cultivating the soil, planting the seeds. I mean, like it is the hard labor in the 4-year. Okay. Now those seeds, they've been there, they've been cultivating, even if you've been ignoring them, even if you've been neglecting them a little bit, they're hardy little seeds. So they've been in there, they're growing, they're ready to pop through the soil, grow and come to fruition right now in this 8-year. but be prepared to do the work. Like, be prepared to harvest this year. So, you know, we've got our planting stage, and then we've got the growth that happens and occurs, and it happens in all different speeds and in all different ways. The 8-year is the harvest year, and harvesting is hard work. Like, my grandparents lived on a farm. I really like have a deep understanding of like what actually goes into harvesting crop. Even if they had a little garden, even if they had a little farm, you know what I mean? Like, it's a lot of work. It's a lot of work to like pick all those string beans and then can them so that they're there and available for you to eat through the year. Like, it's not, it can't be poo-pooed. It also can't be put off. Harvesting can't be put off. You can't be like, oh yeah, those beans, they're ready to pick, but I'm going to wait until next week. No, they have to be picked then. Otherwise, they're gone. And all that work that you've done, it's gone. So be prepared to harvest this year. Be prepared to do the work that's in front of you in the moment that needs to be done. And if you approach this upcoming year with that mindset, I promise you, you're going to get to the end of 2024 and you're going to be like, wow, like, look what I accomplished. Look what I was able to harvest. Look what I was able to create in my life. And then in 2025, we will move into the 9-year and we'll close and wrap everything up in a tight little bow, and then we'll move into the next cycle. But the 8-year really is a year, 2024, like really is a year that we should be enjoying the fruits of our labor. The cycle is hard. Like, you know, everywhere through the cycle, every year through the cycle has its hard parts. And even the 9-year, you know, the 2025, the 9 years can be incredibly difficult too, because we experience lots of endings in the last year of the cycle. So I feel like the 8-year is kind of the Kazemi of the numerological cycle. The 8-year is like the place that you actually really get to enjoy the fruits of your labor. And there's not too much negative from an energetic perspective that happens in an 8-year. Now, yes, like if you're not showing up and you're not being disciplined and you're not doing the work and, you know, you're not being in this place of like conscious alignment, it can be rough, the 8-year. But I'm assuming if you are listening to this, you're somebody that, you know, wants to like onboard these tips that I'm giving you today and really make the most out of this energetic year, which means that you're walking into it from a very conscious place and a conscious perspective. And, you know, so if you're doing that, then likely you're going to have an incredible experience in 2024, as long as you're willing to show up and do the work. You know, so the radical responsibility and accountability piece, it's hard because there's so much happening at any given moment. And there are so many factors that are beyond our control, right? So in every instance, in every scenario, you know, we show up to catch a train and at the previous station, the train conductor gets sick. And so the train gets canceled. That's beyond our control, right? So, you know, and we were supposed to be at an important meeting that was going to yield us a big financial return. We're not able to catch the train. We don't make it to the meeting. We don't get the financial return. There's so many things that happen that are beyond our control. But the one thing I can tell you that we can control in any single scenario and situation is our attitude and our effort. How we respond to every situation that happens to us is entirely on us. And choosing to, in the most difficult moments in our lives where we feel like everything's out of control, where we feel like things aren't going right, where we feel like we've been wrong done by, when we feel like, you know, somebody doesn't have our highest and best good at heart, when we feel betrayed, when we feel like we've been misled, when we feel like we've been deceived, in those moments, to actually just pause and return to self and tap into our connection with God, source, universe, all that is, and our higher self, and ask, how does the highest expression of me respond in this situation right now? Who do I choose to be in this extremely difficult time or difficult situation, or facing this challenge or facing this obstacle? Who do I choose to be that actually represents the highest expression of who I came here to be? That's within your control. Not making justifications, not making excuses for yourself, for your bad behavior. Really just owning, okay, yeah, this might suck. This might suck really bad, whatever it is that's happening. But it's like, is me sitting here complaining about it or making an excuse or making a justification or quitting or surrendering or throwing in the towel or getting angry with somebody, or showing a side of myself or my personality that, you know, really is a shadow frequency of who I am? Like, is that going to serve my highest and best good? Is that going to help or improve the situation? Or can I actually just return to self, get myself a little bit more grounded, understand that the only thing I can control is my attitude and my effort, and choose to be radically self-responsible and accountable for how I show up in the world, especially in my most difficult and challenging moments. Think how different the world would be if every human being simply did that. If every time there was a difficulty or a challenge, they just took a breath, took a pause, came back to self, tapped into higher consciousness, and asked how the highest expression of them should be showing up in that moment. I mean, we would live in an entirely different world. But this is the part that we can play in the changing of the current reality. Like, this is the part that we can play in changing the world. It's not by convincing somebody else to do it. It's by doing it ourselves. And it's by willing to take inventory of our bad behavior also. By being willing in hindsight to be like, oh, that sucked. I really could have done that differently. Looking at the data, not about beating yourself up, but looking at the data so that you can do better the next time. We are powerful, powerful creators, but we create negativity and foster difficulty and cultivate chaos in our lives more often than we're actually cultivating the things that we desire in our life, which is peace, joy, prosperity, abundance, right? So we have to really look at that, and we have to be willing to spend the time to sit down and evaluate how we're performing, how we're humaning, like, how are we doing this thing called life? Are we showing up as the highest expression of us, or are we just allowing ourselves to reside and operate in shadow frequency? We have a choice in every moment of every day, how we choose to do that. So take the last couple of weeks of this year to really reflect, to get really clear, to make a plan for when those old behaviors start to show up and rear their ugly little heads. Like, what are you going to do to prevent yourself from falling into the shadow frequency? What are you going to do to activate your remembrance of how powerful you are, to activate your remembrance of your ability to actually tap into the highest expression of who you came here to be in any moment? How are you going to do that? And then go out and make it an amazing 2024. Okay, so that's my transmission. I am open to We can have discussion now, if you would like. Any
Yeah,
thoughts?
thank you. Thank you for sharing that. There, actually like this month I've been reflecting a lot, actually for this whole year, everything, in connection to what you just said and where, I want to get better, I guess, for 2024 and expand on things in relation to my business, mostly. And so, I did a lot actually this year, and right towards the end, I feel like because I've been showing up a lot more and I've been pretty consistent about it, that I'm seeing like how much of an impact it's already making. And I feel like for the year, it's almost like it's preparing itself for the year to come in 2024. And sure, there's areas that I can improve on, and those are those areas that I want to look at and evaluate as well. So I appreciate, you sharing all that about the last 2 weeks of the month and how to reflect it and be accountable for all those things that will lead to a much more successful, business and reap the rewards from that effort. And so, yeah, so there is, some effort in all this and the building the foundations. I just love how you tied it all together with the numbers.
Yeah. I love looking at the numerology, especially from a reflective place. I mean, I think there's so much that we can actually learn
Mm,
from, again, it's all about awareness, right? It's
yeah.
all
Mhm.
about consciousness, just being conscious of what's happening around us.
Yeah.
That is really the most important part.
Yeah, and the eight though, like, you're saying like if you break it out into two fours, then you're building double foundation there. So yeah, it could be a double the work of the foundation that you're building. So I like
Yeah.
it.
And often, the thing about the harvest year also is it is also learning, because
Mm,
as we're harvesting, we often have the realizations of things that we could have done differently in the
yeah.
cultivation of the, and so then it's like, oh, we can do it better the next cycle.
Yep. Yep. It's all been a learning process, really.
It all is. That's what we chose. We
Yeah.
chose the process.
It's like somebody, I think I heard somebody say it's like doing an experimentation. And that's kind of what we're doing when we like launch our business and we're in the business. And part of it is some of that experimentation. And then if something doesn't seem like, that you can improve on, then you just learn from that. You just grow like in every instant, you get a little better at it. I guess, it's like riding a bike, I guess.
Well, it's definitely all a big experiment.
Yes.
I feel like every single day we're just in an experiment. Like
Yes.
creators up there shaking us around in these little petri dishes. No.
I feel that sometimes. Like I feel you guys are experimenting on me.
Looks like Cause is driving. Any thoughts, Cause?
Yeah, I am driving. Sorry, I wish I wasn't, but yeah, that it's just such a good reminder, kind of from our conversation last night as well, of like let's reflect and that radical self-responsibility piece, and like even last night and this morning I've kind of been pondering like how I haven't shown up for myself and how I haven't done the thing, and I've done many other things around the thing, but I haven't done the thing. And so I'm excited for this year coming, to really put some of those things into play. And I haven't been excited for a number of years. So that feels really nice. And so I guess maybe my question would be, it's like, when you don't feel like doing the damn thing, what do? You just
Well,
do it?
I would say you just do the thing. And it
Yeah.
depends on the thing, right? It depends on what it is.
Mhm.
But I would say that, you know, from if we just look at the numerology again, because that's kind of the theme of what we're talking about, the 7-year is the evaluation, right? It's the coming back to self, it's the figuring out what's in alignment, it's the shedding of the things that aren't in alignment, the recalibrating, the yeah, it is the like return to alignment, the 7-year. The 8-year is like, you already did that. Now you go do the work. Now you go harvest. You know what I mean? And the farmer doesn't feel like, I can guarantee you that the wheat farmer does not like the week or the 2 weeks or the month leading up to and during the wheat harvest. It's not fun. Like there's no fun part about that. You know what I mean? And whether he feels like doing it or not actually has nothing to do with whether or not it needs to get done. It's just like, oh, you don't feel like harvesting today? Well, what does that have to do with anything? Like, get your ass out there and harvest. You know, you put in the work, now get out there, get it done. So, you know, I think that, and especially as spiritual people, I think that we make a lot of excuses and we use alignment and as an excuse a lot of times for our bad behavior and our justifications and our excuses. And so I would say, you know, again, I think the most important thing that we can ever do in any of this is to stay conscious. So if you're like, I don't feel like doing this, you don't just immediately go into an excuse or spiritually bypassing why you shouldn't do it. You just are like, okay, am I making an excuse or a justification? Is this really truly not in my highest and best good to do? Or do I just not want to do it because I'm lazy or because it's not exciting, because it's a boring task that I don't want to do, because it's admin work and I don't feel like doing that? Like in those moments, you know, and sometimes I don't know if it was you, Cause, that I was talking to about this yesterday, but sometimes it's like, oh no, it wasn't, it was another client, but it's like being conscious doesn't always mean that we make the decision that is in our highest and best good, right? You might be like, I really don't feel like doing this today. And then you're like, okay, you know, this doesn't feel aligned, or I don't feel like doing this. And then you're like, okay, well, you know, what's behind that? What's the deal? You are conscious about what you're going through and you walk through it. And it's like, no, I just don't feel like doing it. And I feel like fucking off and going and doing this other thing instead. You might choose to do that. But the fact that you actually paused and had the conversation with yourself where you made yourself fully aware of what was going on instead of acting unconsciously, you've already won. Right? Whether you choose to do the thing or not. Now, you know, sometimes it's like, nope, I don't want to do that. I'm going to go do something else. Even though I know it's not in my highest and best good, but at least I'm making a conscious decision about it. Right? And you don't make those decisions over and over and over. Like with whatever you're going through in the moment, it might be like, nope, I can't, I'm not going to, it doesn't feel good. I don't want to do it. I know that I'm, you know, operating from a lower frequency right now in choosing this choice, but this is the choice I choose. When you're conscious, you can never make a bad decision. When you are consciously considering all options, you can never make a bad decision. That's what I believe. So it's all about the awareness, and it's all about it's all about living consciously and not living unconsciously. And for me, I think like this has been the biggest thing with like the cutting out the alcohol is, you know, apart from, I have 4 months, no alcohol today. So apart from, you know, like now it's crazy where I'm just like, oh, I just feel the feels all the time because I don't have a numbing mechanism. So I have to just sit in it and feel it. You know, it's fucking confronting. But apart from that, I recognize, like I'm able to actually be in that place, even though I wasn't drinking a lot. Like it was robbing me of the ability to live consciously in each moment because it was numbing or dampening my ability to be present in the moment. And so it's just enabling me to live so much more consciously. Yeah. And I think that the more moments through our day that we can stay conscious, the better off we are. So those are my deep thoughts for the day. All right. Well, have an amazing rest of your day, morning, evening, wherever you are in the world, as you're catching this live with me, or you're watching the replay, or you're watching or listening to this wherever you may be watching and listening to it. And have an epic rest of the year.
You too. Thank you.
Ciao.
Thanks, Sam.
Bye.
Bye.